Good evening, friends. Myself, Dr. Vishweshwaran, and I am currently working as a consultant, interventional pulmonology and sleep specialist at Yashoda Hospital, Malakpet. So the topic today is about the updates in COVID. I wouldn't be boring you with so much of numerics and number facts, but it was just all about like what you really have to know about COVID and when do you really have to consult, and are you the one person who is prone to have severe COVID infection, and just a few words about the vaccination and what are all the myths that are associated with the COVID. That's what we are going to deal with it. So a brief introduction about the COVID-19 infection. The COVID-19 pandemic, which is otherwise referred to as the SARS-CoV-2, as we all know, was first identified in December 2019 in Wuhan in China. And following that, the WHO, that is the World Health Organization, has declared it as a pandemic in March 2020. So before we go to the updates, we really have to know is how does COVID get transmitted? So there are two major modes of transmission for any virus, what we refer to as a droplet transmission, or the other thing what we refer to as the airborne transmission. So whenever we cough or whenever we sneeze, the droplets that are produced generally travel to a distance of about 6 feet. So they are capable of infecting any person who come in this vicinity of the 6 feet, and they are major roles in close distance or the short distance transmission. So by maintaining a social distancing and by wearing of cloth face mask or surgical mask or respirators or by means of any other face covering, we are mainly trying to prevent this droplet transmission from making a person getting infected with COVID-19. But however, there is another mode of transmission which we refer to as the airborne transmission. So this occurs when the droplet becomes much smaller in the size. When it becomes in the nuclei form, it can travel a distance greater than the 6 feet, and it can affect a person who has not even come in close proximity to a patient who has got infected. So this sort of airborne transmission may play a major role in transmission when you are in restaurants or in choirs or in gyms or nightclubs, office or in religious venues, and often where they are overcrowded. In addition to this, the transmission also depends upon the infectivity of a person. If a virus is very highly transmissible, a single person may infect a large number of patients. So that is what we refer to as the super spreading events. That is a single person infecting hundreds of patients. This may be because of the close proximity, or it may be because of the virulence of the virus as well. So this is just a picture that shows how it really spreads. So here you have an infected person who is coughing. So you have a droplet transmission, which for example, if you are coughed and these droplets are there on the surface, let's say your mouse or your coffee mug, and if another person comes in direct contact with this and he doesn't wash his hand and he goes and touches his nose or his eyes, he gets the droplet transmitted infection. Or it may be because of a direct contact also. If he coughs in his hand and he shakes hand with you, then you get a direct transmission of this virus. In addition to this, there are droplet nuclei. For example, when this plays a major role in hospital settings and in large crowded areas where there is very minute particles which are suspended in the air. And this is when inhaled by the person can still have a transmission of COVID-19 infection. So these are the various mechanisms by which you get a COVID-19. So understanding this is very important, because only when you understand how it is getting transmitted, you can really know how you can prevent you from getting infected. So before we go to the prevention aspect, when should I really suspect COVID-19 infection? So most of the COVID illnesses are generally present with mild symptoms, but there are chances that it may even progress to severe illness. So in many people, they have found that who did not have prior ENT complaints, if you have got a loss of taste combined with a loss of smell, then it is associated with COVID-19 infection in 95% of the cases. And another important thing is, it is not that when you acquire the virus, you will immediately start showing symptoms. You start showing symptoms only 4 to 5 days later, which we refer in scientific term as the median incubation period. And generally, most of these patients start showing symptoms after 2 to 7 days following the exposure. And almost all the patients will become symptomatic with one symptom or the another before 12 days. So if you had contact with a person and if you didn't have symptoms for at least 12 days, then though you cannot 100% say, you can be confident that your chances of having a COVID infection are less, since most of the patient will start showing one symptom of or the another before 12 days of contact. So what are all the other symptoms you can face? Fever, very common. Loss of appetite is also common. Fatigue is one thing which really starts off you seeking for a hospital care. Loss of smell, as we have already seen, is one of the characteristic features of COVID-19. And when this when this virus becomes very severe and enters into your lung, you start showing symptoms of respiratory tract like persistent cough or shortness of breath or coughing up with sputum. And it may also be associated with muscle aches. So these are all the common symptoms. So when do you really think that you will require a hospital care? That occurs when you start difficulty in waking. You may have a meningitis or a confusion, or there is bluish discoloration of the face or the lips. That means your pneumonia has become very severe, that it has affected almost all parts of the lung. You start throwing up blood. You start having persistent chest pain. Your blood parameters show decrease in the white blood corpuscles. You start having kidney failure and high fever. These are red flag signs. But any patient who start developing shortness of breath or persistent cough or unremitting fever, they should immediately seek a hospital care to look for the presence of pneumonia. So once you develop this illness, the time duration in which your breathing problem, which in scientific term we refer to as dyspnea, occurs is 5 to 8 days. That means when you initially have a COVID-19 infection, you may feel that you are totally normal. But it is only after a week, that is almost between 5 to 8 days, you really start showing up the severe forms of COVID-19 infection in the form of breathlessness. And when you go for the extreme forms of breathlessness, which we call it as the acute respiratory distress syndrome, it occurs between 8 to 12 days. And generally the ICU admission occurs between 9.5 to 12 days following getting a coronavirus infection. And you may wonder, many times your doctor may say that, or you may go to a doctor saying that 1 week back I was totally normal, but my relative got admitted in the ICU all of a sudden. So I don't know what is really happening. But that presentation is also common in COVID, where some patients with COVID-19 may rapidly deteriorate about 1 week after illness onset. So you have to be very careful, at least for 2 weeks when you have a COVID-19 infection, because the real insult to the lungs occur after 1 week of getting the infection. So almost 1/3 of your patients may land up in an ICU, and almost 39 to 72% of patients who are in ICU may land up in mortality. And the median length of hospitalization, that is the minimum number of, generally the number of days when the patient stays back in the hospital, can vary roughly around 10 days. So this effectively means that though we have treatment for COVID, we are still not having the best drugs in our armamentarium to control this mortality. So many a times what happens in an ICU setting is you treat with everything, whatever you can, but still there is a very high chance of mortality. And that is what makes this coronavirus really a serious infection and something which is troubling the entire world. And that is the intensity of this infection during this pandemic. So next question is, can I spread COVID infection even when I don't have symptoms? For example, you say that you went to a hotel where one of your friends turned out to be a COVID positive. Right now, you do not have any symptoms, but are you still capable of spreading that infection? So the answer is, there are something which are referred to as the asymptomatic and the pre-symptomatic COVID-19 infection. So asymptomatic, as the word says, that you don't have any symptoms, but still you may be a carrier. That means you are harboring the virus in you. So this may occur in 1 out of 5 patients. So since you don't have any symptom, you don't get tested, and you keep on spreading the disease. And can be common, and the total number of infection is always likely greater than the number of the case reported. For example, in media, we are getting so much of COVID cases, we have positive and all these things. But these are the real number? it may not be, because many of these asymptomatic carriers are there in the society and they really don't get tested. And in few cases, you may have a COVID test, which may turn out to be a negative, but still your CT or X-ray may show suggestive of pneumonia. That may still be a possibility of an underlying COVID. And RT-PCR detection with low cycle thresholds and larger quantities of viral RNA. So what it effectively means is, so whenever these asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic cases are tested with an RT-PCR, in most of the cases, they have a low cycle threshold. That means they have very high quantities of viral RNA. So even though the concerned person may not be symptomatic or may be pre-symptomatic, he has very high quantities of viral RNA in his test, and he is capable of infecting the vulnerable population like aged people or patients with underlying comorbidities. So if you come in contact with an COVID positive patient, even though if you are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, make sure you get tested, because it may not affect you, but it may affect your loved ones who are vulnerable for this infection. So the next question, when every patient asks when they come to the hospital with a COVID infection, am I vulnerable to a severe COVID illness? That effectively means that will I get a severe form of pneumonia, or will I get admitted in an ICU? Will I go into a ventilator? So the answer is most of these COVID infections are generally mild and they are self-limiting. But there are few characteristics of patients which in studies have found to make them vulnerable to severe forms of COVID illness. So one of the most important risk factor for severe forms of the COVID illness or the complications of the COVID illness or even the death is your age. So higher the age, the greater is the risk for you to develop severe form of COVID illness. And CFR, what we refer to as the case fatality rate, it is very high in patients who are more than 85 years or older. So if you have a grandpa or a grandma at home and you turn out to be a COVID positive, you may not be the person who is getting suffered by that infection in the majority of cases. And it may be those vulnerable population who may land up having severe illnesses with COVID. In addition to this, the increased illness severity and adverse outcomes are also seen in patients who has got a prior history of stroke, who has got diabetes, who has got chronic lung diseases, chronic kidney diseases, hypertension, having underlying heart failure, having underlying coronary vascular disease, or pulmonary hypertension. So these are some of the characteristic features of the patients who may have a higher chance of landing up in severe forms of COVID-19 infection. So the next important question which everybody asks once they get COVID and they get recovered from COVID is, am I vulnerable to get reinfected with COVID? And so is COVID reinfection really a myth or reality? So published case reports have shown that reinfection is a possible entity, but however, the number of the patients getting reinfected with COVID is generally negligible. So most of the questions related to reinfection are still unanswered, like how long people who have recovered from COVID are protected against reinfection with COVID virus. We don't know the answer till now. And what concentration of the antibodies is needed to confer a protection, and how often reinfection may occur. We still don't have an answer for all these questions, and science is in evolution, and in future, we may have tests to clearly say that are we prone to develop these reinfections, and if so, which are all the patients who may have a chance of getting reinfected. So how does reinfection occur? So a patient who has got COVID, who has come out negative, COVID-19 RT-PCR came out to be negative, again he starts showing the viral RNA positive in his swab test. But that does not necessarily mean that the patient has got a reinfection, and it may be a part of a dead virus as well. So for finding out exactly if it is a reinfection, you need to do further molecular tests to identify whether it is the same strain of the virus which is causing the infection. And along with this documentation of the RT-PCR, you should also find out if you are symptomatic. And it has also been found that the patients who have recovered can continue to shed this virus in the swab test for 3 months after the illness onset. So many people for mild illness, they'll keep on repeating their RT-PCR, and invariably in 1 or 2 of the tests, it may turn out to be positive, even though the patient does not have any symptom and he has already recovered. That may be even because of the underlying dead virus, and it may continue to persist for as long as 3 months. And concentrations considerably lower than during illness has been found. So for example, when you see these cycle thresholds, it may be in the higher range. That means that the viral load has been continuously decreasing. Even then you can have a possible positive RT-PCR, but it may still not suggest a reinfection. So reinfection is a possibility, but in real clinical practice, it has been to a very low extent, and not all repeat RT-PCR positive or reinfection. It may be because of your dead virus as well. And only when you have recurrence of symptoms along with positive, with radiological worsening, and you have definitive molecular test to confirm reinfection, you can be labeled as a reinfected case. So one of the most important things what patient comes is they get a CT scan done from some of the private practitioners. They come and ask, sir, my CORAD score is 6. So does that mean that I have a severe form of COVID and I should get admitted in ICU immediately? The answer is no. And if not, what is CT severity score? These two scores are totally a different entity. So let's go what it is. See, CORAD's score just says whether your CT scan is typical or it is consistent or you are doubtful or it is very classical of COVID. It doesn't say that CORAD 6 doesn't mean that you have severe forms of COVID-19 infection. No, that is wrong. For example, if you have a CORAD 6, it doesn't mean that you have a severe pneumonia. All that it means is that you already have a COVID RT-PCR positive and your CT pattern is correlating with COVID-19 infection. If you go for CORAD's 5, it just says that there is a very high level of suspicion of COVID. It doesn't say that there is high level of severity of COVID. And when it goes to CORAD 4, there is a high suspicion, but however, there may be abnormality suspicion for other diseases as well. And CORAD's 3 means indeterminate, and CORAD's 2 means the pattern in the CT does not classically fit into COVID. And CORAD's 1 means probably you are dealing with a different illness. So your CORAD score does not correlate with the severity of the pneumonia, and your CORAD score will not dictate whether you have to go to an ICU or to a ward or a routine OPD care. All that it says is whether your CT is fitting into classical COVID pattern or not. The important parameter is your CT severity score. This indicates that how much percentage of your lungs are getting infected with pneumonia. Even that will be important only when it is taken in consideration with the clinical context. So for example, you get a score of 10 out of 40, 20 out of 40, 30 out of 40. So higher the number out of 40, that means more of your lung is involved. And that is very important in terms of prognosticating. But however, your CORADs does not indicate severity. It just indicates the likelihood of you having a CT scan, which may be persistent with your COVID pattern. So for example, if you see this CT, maybe this you may say it as 25% involvement, this you may say it as 50% involvement. So this is what we refer to as the CT severity score. That shows that your pneumonia is abnormal or is more or less, but your CORAD score does not define that. Okay, so the other important thing, once CT is done, people come up with a lot of tests for COVID. Should I get a rapid antigen test? Should I get a COVID antibody? Should I get a RT-PCR? So before going that, what are the tests that are available to diagnose COVID-19 infection? So you have one, the important one is your COVID-19 RT-PCR. Apart from that, you have a rapid antigen testing, and what we have is the COVID antibodies. So don't forget about all this algorithm. All that you have to know is the most important test which is widely used is your COVID-19 RT-PCR. So many times you will see that your doctor is saying your CT scan is suggestive of pneumonia and you have a high suspicion of COVID-19 infection, but unfortunately your COVID RT-PCR will come negative. So if it comes negative, does that mean that you don't have COVID? No, definitely not. Because the sensitivity of this test is only between 60 to 70%. That means if 100 people are going to have a corona infection, and if you are going to do this swab test, only 70 will come positive. The rest 30, even though they harbor a coronavirus infection, the result will come negative. So if your COVID RT-PCR comes positive, you can confidently say that you have a corona. But if it comes negative, you will not be able to say you have a corona or not. So that is when your doctor, in consideration with your clinical history, he will also look into your CT scan and then say that your probability of COVID is high, but you have a COVID RT-PCR negative report, but still you have to get admitted into your COVID ward. So that doesn't mean COVID RT-PCR negative doesn't mean that you don't have COVID. The other important test what we come across these days are the antigen test. These antigen tests gives a quick turnaround time. That means you will get the results in 15 to 30 minutes. But these have a very low sensitivity. So it will miss many of these patients who have got a corona positive. For example, if your antigen comes positive, we can say that you are positive. But if it comes negative, again, we cannot say that you are negative. So there is definitely no single test which can effectively rule out that you do not have COVID-19 infection. The next important thing with the upcoming of the antibodies blood test we have, does COVID antibodies always protect me from COVID? So I got a COVID infection, now I do my COVID antibodies. Does that mean that I will never get COVID infection? The answer is still unknown. So when we go to, if you see this graph, you can see that the symptoms classically starts in this phase, as we have already seen, between 5 to 14 days. And there are multiple immune response. We have something called as an innate immune response. You have something called as a cellular response. So, and you have something called as an antibody response. So let's assume you start getting virus at this point. Your innate immune response immediately starts. This is the first line of defense. And for your virus to become detectable, it will not become detectable on day one. So it will get detectable on 2 to 5 days. So that is when your virus starts appearing. That's when your COVID RT-PCR may come out to be positive. Then comes your cellular response. So this is your cellular response. We don't have tests to measure our cellular response. So once your virus has attained a peak, it will just fall back and it will become low. So during this time, both your IgM and IgG antibodies starts rising. And when your virus becomes at a very low phase, that's when your IgG comes at its peak. So what I am trying to say from this is, if you get a positive IgG antibody, that means your viral phase is over and you already started developing immunity for this virus. If you just have IgM antibody positive, that means you can still have the virus and you can still, your immune system is still producing antibodies to counter this virus. And this doesn't suggest that you have gone out of the infective phase. So this is what we really understand. What does a positive antibody tell us? The positive antibody tells us the person was infected in the past with the virus that causes COVID-19. If both IgG and IgM are positive, the infection was a recent because it was within a few past weeks. But if only IgG is present, that means that the infection has occurred more than a few weeks ago. Because if you go from this graph, even when the infection is over, your IgG will be always persisting. But for example, your IgM will stop immediately. For this is your IgM, it will stop after some time and it will not continue to persist. So if your IgM and IgG are positive, you had an infection in the recent past. And if only IgG is present, that means you had an infection long ago. And what it does not tell us if the person has recovered. Because still if your IgM is there, your infection may be ongoing. If the antibodies are neutralizing, you don't know how much of antibodies you have produced. So are you really immune? We don't know. The antibody levels, that is still not, it is available, but we still don't know the cutoff beyond which we can say that you have developed enough immunity to get protected from the infection. So if you don't have, many people come with the question, I had a COVID-19 infection, I recovered, but I don't have an antibody. What does it mean? The first possibility could be the person has not been infected. Maybe at that time the COVID was a false positive report. The person was recently infected because we saw that the antibodies take time to develop. So if you are recently infected, you may not have a positive report. The person was infected and mounted an antibody response, but the antibody levels are below the level of detection of test. This is because of your test. Your test is not that sensitive enough to pick up these antibodies. or the person was infected but cleared the virus without mounting an immune response. For example, your body is not primed enough to initiate an immune response. So a negative antibody test does not tell us if a person is susceptible to infection. So this is important. So many people ask that I am COVID positive, I recovered, I don't have antibodies. So am I at a higher risk of developing infection? We still don't have the answer, and it does not tell us if a person is susceptible to infection. So does the presence of antibodies against COVID-19 mean a person is immune and protected from getting infected again? As we have already discussed, no one knows the answer yet. Generally, a person who recovers from a viral infection is protected against a new infection if the antibodies are of adequate quality and quantity. And changes in the virus sequence, which we refer to as mutation, can make the virus immunity less effective. That is why you keep getting flu infection every year, because you are having various strains of flu infection coming every year. So not necessarily this year corona may be this strain, maybe next year corona may be different strain. So this immunity may not help you in protecting yourself from the next year's strain. And protection from reinfection with common cold caused by other milder coronavirus is short term. And for other coronavirus such as SARS, antibodies have been detected a few years later. So for COVID-19 infection, we do not yet have enough data to confirm if your antibodies protect and what level of antibodies are required and how long this protection will last. Okay, and now with many people getting affected, having the second wave and third wave, we are thinking, okay, have we developed the herd immunity? So what does herd immunity literally mean? Is the indirect protection of individuals from an infectious disease when a high proportion of population is immune. For example, if 10 people are there, if 8 people have got the infection and they have developed immunity, then there is a higher possibility that the other 2% could have had an asymptomatic infection and could have had this immunity. That is what we refer to as the herd immunity. And it has been found that only fewer than 10% of the general population have detectable COVID-19 antibodies. And worldwide, most people remain susceptible to COVID-19 infection. So it doesn't mean that if many people in your family have got COVID, you develop a sort of herd immunity and you cannot be overconfident that you will never get COVID infection again. You are still at a higher chance of getting a COVID-19 infection. And a lot of data are coming. Does plasma really work? So our ICMR has given a clear guideline on whom this plasma has to be given. It should be given only in an early stage of COVID-19 disease. It should be given between 3 to 7 days from the onset of the symptoms and should not be given for later than 10 days. And the patient should not have any IgG antibody against COVID-19, and always informed consent has to be taken. So if your doctor is giving a plasma for you as a mode of treatment, then all these things will be considered by your doctor before giving you the plasma therapy. Okay, now we are almost coming to the fag end of the presentation. So the most important thing which everybody is curious about is every day you see in the newspaper and in the media, the vaccine is passing through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, emergency medical approval. So what is it all about these phases? So for any drug to pass through and to become available to you, it has to go through an extensive clinical research. So it has multiple phases from phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. For example, in phase 0, it involves 10 to 20 volunteers to see how the vaccine works. Then in phase 2, it involves 20 to 100 volunteers to ensure safety. And in phase 2, you have few hundred volunteers to check whether the vaccine is working at dose decided in phase 1 is safe. And in now what we are receiving is the phase 3 in most of these vaccines, where hundreds to 1,000 volunteers are randomly given, where one group receives the vaccine, where one group doesn't receive the vaccine, and they check for the efficacy and adverse events. And last comes, once a vaccine is administered, again all these data are compiled, and then they look for the post-marketing surveillance to look whether these vaccines in long term have any sort of adverse events or not. So right now, most of these vaccines are in phase 3, and that is why the government is confident in saying that we may roll out a vaccine in near time soon, maybe a month or 2 from now. So what are all the vaccines that are currently available in the world? There are this is as on 8th December 2020, you have got 52 candidate vaccines in clinical evaluation, and the most one which we are always thinking about is the Bharat Biotech, which is an inactivated virus, and as you can see, it is already into the phase 3. And you have the AstraZeneca virus or the University of Oxford virus, which is also we are very much keenly looking for. It is again in phase 3, and already the Beijing vaccine or the Chinese vaccine has already been into the market in UAE, and that is also there. And you have Sinovac, you have Sputnik, so from Russia. So you have almost 52 vaccines, and in few countries the vaccine administration has started. For example, even FDA has approved the COVID vaccine in US for rollout, and Britain has started vaccinating its population. UAE has started, China has started, Russia has started, and India is very near to go through this vaccination process. So all these are what you heard till now will be like what you will do once you have a COVID. So, but the most important thing is how can I prevent myself from getting COVID? So as we all know, it is stay safe and self-isolate. That is the most important thing. Clean your hands frequently with soap and water for at least 40 seconds or with an alcohol-based rub for at least 20 seconds. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or a flexed elbow when you cough or sneeze. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, and maintain a physical distance of at least 1 meter to prevent the droplet from falling. Stay away from crowds and from poorly ventilated indoor spaces. At least use a fabric mask where physical distancing of at least 1 meter is not possible. Use a surgical mask or a medical mask if you are at a higher risk, and regularly clean and disinfect frequently touched surface. This has been the dictum for almost all the pandemic, and COVID-19 is not an exception to it as well. And I'll just end by addressing few of the myths with the world, which the World Health Organization felt needs to be clarified. So many people ask, like micronutrients, vitamin D, vitamin C, if I take, will it prevent me from getting COVID? So it cannot prevent or it cannot cure COVID-19 infection. But these micronutrients are essential for overall immunity of the patient, and taking them is in prescribed doses is not a harm. And HCQ, so in India we used to use HCQ previously, but right now a lot of studies have come saying that the HCQ does not have clinical benefits in treating COVID-19 infection. And can people wear mask while exercising? So people generally, if they are in outdoor activities or in intense activities, they should not wear mask, as it may reduce the ability to breathe. And once you wear a mask and when you exhale, the wet will cover these pores and make your breathing very difficult, and it may promote the growth of microorganisms and infection. So when you are working out or when you are doing any sort of these activities, try to maintain a physical distance and try to avoid mask in those settings. And COVID is caused by a virus, not a bacteria. Yeah, many people ask, like, I am taking antibiotics, will my COVID get cured? Your COVID is caused by a virus and not by a bacteria. So only your bacteria may get treated by an antibacterial and not your virus. And many people ask, like, I am continuously wearing, so will I not be able to get in oxygen and leave out carbon dioxide? No, it is not. Like, most of your masks are not seal proof. So even when you wear these masks, you can effectively breathe and breathe out. People ask that once I got COVID, so am I going to suffer it for lifelong? No, definitely not. Most people who get COVID recover from it, though few people have some complications related to COVID-19 infection. And because alcohol is a spirit, so many people are asking, so taking an alcohol, will it decrease my chance of getting COVID? No, that is definitely not. Drinking alcohol, in fact, decreases your immunity and it may be dangerous. So adding pepper to your soup or other meals will also not prevent or cure COVID. So it is just for your taste and nothing more than that. And once famous US president also said that you can take, there was an article saying that taking methanol or taking these sanitizers inside the body. No, that is definitely wrong. And many people have even died trying to take these methanol, ethanol or bleach. So that is definitely not a solution for your COVID, and that should not be used. And So many people ask that I am vaccinated for pneumococcal and influenza vaccine. So will that prevent COVID virus? No, they are different bacteria and viruses, and your COVID virus is totally a different virus. So those vaccines may help you to prevent you from that particular virus or bacteria, but not against COVID virus. And can regularly rinsing your nose with saline help infection with new coronavirus? No, there is still now no evidence to suggest that routine cleaning of your nose will prevent you from having a COVID-19 infection. And does the new COVID virus affect only the old people or the young people are also susceptible? It affects irrespective of age, though the severity will be more in the elderly. So it can affect everyone, and even young people should be sensitized to severity of COVID.